Just less than.
Yeah. Yeah. About Rochester. Yeah. Yeah.
They all know. So.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty much anywhere in the state of Minnesota, I go, I have,
Yeah.
I've sold. That's not. Oh, for they don't.
That's great.
Ramsey County, what the hell are these people?
I didn't expect anyone to call for help, but.
Yeah, no. People just decide to make it a big mess for
That big
everybody.
chunk of that is part of like.
Yeah, we started.
That's crazy. Part of that central, grant.
That's that one.
But then, yeah. They're on, and so they kind of all like. Together. I do all your two that are up there.
No, it's just my told him about my clients. Thankfully, we walking and representatives. Everything there.
Yeah.
So.
Wade. Yeah. You're like. Right. Well, I'm gonna pop in from my office, so I'll be listening, like I was, if anything, just shout and I'll hear you. I'm ready.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. Okay, some great energy in the room.
Good morning.
Exciting topics of conversation. So exciting. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Just gonna try to get these contacts up, and there's a seat up here and a couple seats. There's a seat over here.
So we can do. It's the color of royal. It's really cool. So, yeah, I was in Mexico. I've never $30. Got it right there. Oh,
Wisconsin.
for anything. Yeah. And trying to get it to like out of it.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna watch.
Oh, thank you. He's good.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Yeah.
We are, I'm just so excited to be here and go over these contract modifications and additions. So are we ready? Are we ready to get excited? Yeah. All right. Okay, so I've got them up on the screen. Printed out back to back. These are all the changes. Okay, these are all the forms that have been touched, changed, or added to. We are not going to go over lease contracts, contract for deed, and vacant land. Okay, if you'd like to discuss those on a separate occasion, I'm happy to at any time. But I don't think that they're necessarily most commonly used. Robert?
There's changes on those?
There are changes on many of the lease contracts.
Yeah.
There is contract for deed modifications as well as vacant land purchase agreements. You can see this addendum to lease agreement utility bills. I am just gonna go in order of how they were sent out. So they're not in any particular strategic order, okay? These go into effect on the 1st, which is in 2 days. No, 30 days has to be, yeah, 2 days. So Thursday, these go into effect. They will be automatically uploaded and available via Instinet forms. They will not, these are just Minnesota forms. Let me clarify that. And we will have templates made for you But I wouldn't expect that to be the case happening immediately on August first, because that's the first day all of us have access to anything that's not modified like this. So the actual access to the forms to all of the brokerages and agents happens on the first. So we'll get the templates up and loaded, but we may be, just be prepared. You may be putting together your own grouping of contracts on your own until we can get those templates done. Does that make sense?
They'll be in there, but we just have to throw them in. Gotcha.
They will be in there for you to access the forms individually. They will not immediately be available as a template. Also, just to let you know, we are going to be working on more groupings of templates. So if you have a land property, for example, that has a sewer system or a well, bless you. We will have a contract that groups those together instead of just one master buyer contract or one master listing contract. We'll try to be a little bit more intuitive with a few more options, trying to support you guys with the groupings a little bit better. Does that make sense? Okay, anything else before I dive in that? Why is this here? Who cares? Get out of here.
Well, Jan is wonderful.
Right, Matt.
Oh, my word.
You could not pay me $1 million to use Apple products.
How much to empty your inbox? You need.
Well, that makes me happy.
Right.
I'm not worried about it. They're different people.
I'm only saying that because I did it beforehand.
I just. Okay. That was why. Okay. No, I have 67,000. That's in my personal. That's where all my junk goes. So there's a good, actually, I don't really care how many emails are in my email box or text messages. None of it causes me anxiety. Okay. So any questions before we dive into the contracts? I will do my very best to explain as well as answer questions. I was not part of the forms committee, so I do not know methodology behind any of the decisions that are here.
Don't come at you.
So please don't come at me. I'll come back at you.
As we noticed.
I really do want to help and I want us to talk constructively, and we can be critical and inquisitive and curious along the way. This is intended for all of us to be familiar, understand, and feel equipped to go forward with utilizing these in the field. Okay, so the first one, lots of slash marks. Okay, addendum or amendment to listing contract or a buyer representation contract or a facilitator service agreement.
What do you use to be, really?
Whatever.
What you want.
Just, you know, I mean, and the reality is you do have to indicate, so this is an addendum or an amendment. It's clearly our industry has a difficulty explaining the difference between the two. So they combined it, so we can't be at fault anymore for picking the wrong one.
We don't even have to decide what.
You don't even decide what addendum or suffice it, okay? Yeah, okay, this one I will applaud the forms committee on, okay? All right, so, and then it's basically just referencing which contract are you modifying? Which one, when was it dated? And then what are the terms that you would like to modify? As always, if the line 7 through 18 or any number of open lines is not enough, you can add a supplemental page, indicate such on this page, say see page 2, note page 2. Page 2 does not have to be in a contract form. It could just be a Word document or a whatever, okay? But if it's not enough, so this is signed by these are contracts just between the the agent, that's a party to the transaction. A party to the transaction, meaning facilitator is an option. And then the client signature, okay? All right, and then we've got any questions on that? I mean, I think it's pretty broad scope encompassing. Yes, sir.
So like if we sign up our buyer for 2.7% and they're only paying out 2.4, then we could use this amendment to correct that if we correct the buyer representation contract?
That would be a great use. I will tell you that as has always been, I'm just gonna give you an example. All my buyer contracts stipulate I will be paid 3%. All of my buyer contracts say that. And then my buyer contracts also say that if the MLS, which is going away as of August 15th, if the MLS is paying out or if there's any cooperative compensation, it will reduce that amount owed. I have never modified, even though we have that option. It's not required for you to modify a reduced amount because you're actually documenting it in the compensation disclosure, the amount you're actually earning on the buyer. You absolutely can, that is a great use where you go from 2.7 to 2.4 and you're noting it so that especially if the buyer's coming up with the money, it would probably be appropriate to do that. But if I am going to not request that my full 3% or 2.7 or whatever your original buyer rep agreement states, you can document it just on the compensation disclosure.
Also that, I was under the understanding that
You just,
Yeah, to
you,
match.
the way that it doesn't have to match, it just can't be, you can't get paid more than what your contract says.
Okay, but is this a great opportunity, Duffy, thank you for asking this question. It's a great opportunity, if you have a 2.7 on your thing and it's paying out 3, can you amend it?
You have to,
Oh,
Okay.
you have to.
Just start at the top.
So yeah, just dive right in. So if you have a buyer rep or a facilitator agreement with a client and it's at 2.7 and they're paying out 3%, you have to modify your representation agreement to match what is being paid out. You cannot earn more than what your contract stipulates between your buyer client, but you can earn less without documenting it. Yes.
Where does the rubber meet the road with that in terms of compliance?
You mean with us?
Just period. Like, let's say that I have an agreement with my buyer for 2.7% and
Yep.
this leaves paying out 3, that'd be a miracle, but let's say that happened.
It's gonna happen at the title company.
Oh, the title company is gonna be the limiting, are they gonna want a copy of my representation agreement?
Yep. Your listing contracts and your buyer rep contracts are gonna now have to go to your title company. There's gonna be no other way for them to verify who's earning what. And let me tell you guys, you can give it an on your honor situation, but I definitely think you should just put the onus on the title company to also house those records. And not just, because we've traditionally always had it as an on your honor scenario, especially on listing sides. The MLS has indicated the payout on the buy side, so they followed that. But right now, all of your contracts need to go to the title company.
I know this is not a debate, but why not have a comp disclosure that has both parties' signatures and the agents? It's like an arbitration forms.
Yeah, I get you.
Doesn't that make way more sense? Hey, here's a form, everyone agrees to this. Done.
Get on the forms.
Doesn't that make- Yeah, you should do that, Kim.
You should.
Should we do it together?
I trust, Fred, that you are fully capable of doing it all by yourself. Yes, I agree. And I was hoping that we'd be seeing something like that, and there is nothing like that. Like a summary page of who's getting paid what,
This
right?
kind of stuff's gonna bog title down too.
Oh, yeah.
Just going through all these.
Well,
Make it funner.
yep, so that is a form or some sort of a standard that we can probably create that is just seller side earns this, buyer side earns this, based on what we have agreement on, that only goes to the title company.
Yeah.
Because really, it's a title company specific form. It's really not anything else. So that's something that we could definitely work on, even though it's noted everywhere. It's just, in a few places. Can have a few changes. And I mean that all encompassing addendum amendment thing for all the forms. So the one thing that I think is really interesting is the language that they have here that says, in the event of a conflict between the addendum or amendment and any other provision specified in the contract or agreement, the language of this addendum or amendment shall govern. So they've added that kind of universally on a lot of these new forms where it's like, this is the final. We are going to, as an industry, as professionals, be on top of this stuff and not rely on others to manage this for us as we go through this transition. And I know all of us really, high Cs are really okay with that, and then the low Cs of the group, the low detail-oriented individuals may struggle with that a little bit more, and I just want to make sure you're really mindful of the fact that, Chris has shared a story with me, that there was a situation where an appraiser came to a house and appraised the home $10,000 low because the appraiser never got a copy of the counteroffer addendum from the lender.
I just had that happen.
So I think it is an opportune time for all of us to be proactive in over communicating and over clarifying and over verifying. Does that make sense? Because everything is changing. We all know this. And if we want things to be done correctly and accurately, I think that we need to go to this level of like really being proactive.
Electives, with there not being any sort of indication, most of the time when you have an addendum or an amendment, you choose one on the form. With this, it doesn't look like you'll have to do that.
You don't. You don't.
Star it, could hurt.
Just leave it.
I mean, you certainly can determine, because if you know the difference, I would highly encourage any of you to consider doing that. I mean, they aren't even numbered, they aren't even like, but here's the deal, you guys. Something case by case basis, if you're running into lots of paperwork and lots of like, what do I turn in? What trumps what? Let's discuss it. Because assuming that the recipient, whether it's our internal compliance or the title company or the lender, like the lender is the one that missed the counteroffer addendum and didn't send it to the appraiser.
That was my
Yeah.
situation.
Yep, so more than one situation in the room right now that happened with. So we get an appraisal request on a listing, you can send the appraiser the entire purchase agreement. Right? Can't just rely, or a summary agreement or summary of the terms, right? Over communicate. All right, so.
I've been considered printing a copy of the execute agreement and leaving it on the kitchen counter in addition to any sort of notables that would be helpful for the appraiser, but just like over communicate.
You know, we're over communicate, share information, offer it. There's nothing ever wrong with providing appraiser information. They don't have to use it, but it's not wrong to do it. All right, we have another addendum or amendment form here to the listing contract related to seller concessions specifically. Okay, this one you do indicate addendum or amendment. This is based on the listing contract, only the listing contract, but it's just related to seller concessions. Seller concessions, seller may offer concessions to buyer, which may include contributions to buyer and broker compensation. The seller shall or shall not. They will offer a percentage of the selling price to cooperating brokers representing the buyer. And they will offer a percentage or a flat price, whichever is greater, to cooperating brokers assisting buyer. Assisting refers to facilitation. We're also probably gonna be sharing contracts between listing brokerage and buyer brokerage as well. If shall, this one's super fun, so.
We had a question in the chat that says, sorry, can you scroll up so they can see the top of the form again? So it's addendum or amendment to the listing contract seller concessions.
There you go. That's what it looks like.
So thanks.
Yep. And line number 17. If shall offer compensation to cooperating brokers, the seller authorizes or does not authorize the broker to disclose seller's willingness to offer concessions to potential buyers.
Jeez.
That's
Wow,
funny.
that seems weird.
Why would you not offer? Or
Why would you want to
Disclose.
disclose?
This is-
If they call it
solution.
the seller operating position, you say, I can disclose that?
That's a different question.
The solution would be just an offer with.
This is
And then find
concession.
out.
Yeah, that's how you find out,
Put
yeah.
it in writing. Crazy.
Just tell buyers.
What's this?
Whatever.
Just the company.
This is,
Can a seller change what they told their agent that they would compensate? They can change it at any time?
We just looked at.
Swiss Army.
It's always been true.
Yeah.
That's not new.
Yeah.
That's not new. I can list a house at 6% and the seller can come back and say, I want to change the terms. It's always been the case. It's not a new concept. Both parties have to agree right now. And this still requires both parties agreeing. If you know, line 19 and line 20 requires the agent to sign. So it does require the bilateral agreement. We're gonna need practice with this one and with discussing it with sellers. This is a addendum or amendment, okay? So this is a change. Yep,
Another question, on the buy side, usually we put in a percentage, not a dollar amount, and here they have.
we have the option of doing a dollar amount also on the buy side. We usually use percentages both on the listing side and on the buy side. And if we have a percentage on the buy side and they're offering a flat fee amount and it is more than what you have stipulated on your buyer contract, you would have to amend your buyer contract. If it's less than what you have on your buyer contract, you just have to indicate what the acceptable and agreed amount is on the compensation disclosure agreement between you and your buyer.
Okay.
And that can be in the form of percentage or flat fee. They have both line items on that compensation disclosure.
Thank you.
Just a distinction, we're talking seller concessions here, not buyer broker comp. That's not what this is. This is seller concessions. Now, we've got a practical question.
But it does,
It can be inclusive of, but it can't be designated for. And if you had a listing contract that has defined a buyer broker compensation, then
Is
that's.
that gonna be in the new listing contract, the buyer?
Yes, it is.
compensation?
What's
Yes,
the
it is.
difference between compensation and?
We haven't gotten there yet.
so on line 8, right here, it says seller concessions.
Yes.
Seller may offer concessions to buyer, which may include contributions to buyer broker's compensation. And then it says, if shall, the seller authorize or does not authorize broker to do. Here's the deal, you guys. You in the field are gonna be faced with this to say, if you don't authorize me, why are we doing it? Right?
Right.
So it's a very simple, it's a conversation giving the seller options. Okay? And then it's your job as the professional to guide them through the options and help them understand the best choices to equip you with the tools to market and sell their home.
So if we're gonna have the buyer broker compensation on the listing contract, give me an example of when you would see this having.
That's my point. That's my point. I don't know that this is gonna be used widely.
But what if they come in very under market?
This would be when a seller says, I only want to offer 1% concessions overall. Nothing to exceed 1%. I mean, we have examples in our agent population right now from sellers that don't want to offer any cooperative compensation or concessions. And then 6 months down the road, when their house still hasn't sold, that's when you use this to modify the contract. To say, now that we're all playing nicely in the sandbox together, we're gonna modify and we're going to offer a payout, a concession. Okay, so if they have it in the contract, not likely. If they were at 1 and they want to go to 2, they're at 2 and they want to go to 3, they're at 3 and they want to add 2,500 carpet allowance. You're gonna use this when, this is it right here.
That's.
And you guys, we've never had a seller concession document before of any sort at all. It's always been a verbal conversation and then noted wherever the agent decides to put it. So this is putting it in contract with the seller. So this is an additional tool for us to utilize. Yes.
So we don't fill this out ahead of time, let's say. Buyer's agent comes in, doesn't tell us they're gonna ask for seller concessions, but asks for seller concessions. Seller accepts it. Do you have to go back and fill this out to amend it, saying that they are okay with it?
I would recommend that, yeah.
Will
Yeah.
it still be in the purchase agreement though?
Anywhere else that you document it, yes. But to Brooke's point, it would be documenting that you individually as the listing agent have an agreement with the seller that they have agreed to what the purchase agreement is saying. It's it's going backwards, but it's also being very accurate and very detailed. All right, here's our addendum to purchase agreement contract for deed, which we're not gonna go over because it's contract for deed. If any of you ever need to discuss a contract for deed, I'd be happy to go over that with you. We're now on a buyer representation contract exclusive. So first off, there is a couple of different things to keep in mind. There is an exclusivity contract and then there's a non-exclusive contract. Do we all understand the difference?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the exclusive contract. Nothing has changed except this right here. Broker may not receive compensation for brokerage services provided to buyer from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to in this contract. Okay, so this is the whole, if it's too low, you have to amend for it to increase. That's all that got changed on the buyer representation contract.
Now, where do you put in, you said you put 3, but then you add something somewhere. What's the verbiage you add?
I don't add any verbiage. I put in 3.
So, but you say if it is.
If it's less than,
Yeah.
then I indicate that on the compensation disclosure between me and the buyer.
Oh, not on the.
No, I don't write any language in. I just tell them my fee is 3%. And if they ask a question, then I say, if cooperative compensation is being offered, then I will we'll have a conversation at that time. And then when we discuss cooperative compensation being offered, then I say, I'm not going to charge you the difference.
Okay.
And I say the final documentation, I will show them that it comes on the compensation disclosure. Yes, Robert?
We have a question from Dawn Crow. Why would you take less when your buyer agreed to your fee?
Because it's oftentimes not worth me fighting for it or arguing, or I don't feel convicted enough behind the concept. Really, it's more to protect me when there's no cooperative compensation being offered, like in the example of for sale by owners, where if I'm gonna work harder on for sale by owner for sure, because I'm doing way more work because there's no other agent involved. And so it's always been a protective measure that I've had. So for me, this change that's going on right now with the, documentation in the buyer contracts isn't going to be that much different. There just could be maybe a few more properties that function like for sale by owners. And if it were a for sale by owner, I would advise my client, before we look at this, I need to prepare you for the psychology and mentality of the seller. Right? We're going to have separate classes and conversations around how to prepare yourself for buyer conversations as well as seller conversations, but we're talking just contracts right now. Okay? So buyer representation contract, non-exclusive. I haven't seen this one in a while. Most of us haven't been using this. This used to be a much more popular thing about 20 years ago. Not that that's relevant. I just want you to know that this isn't a brand new form to the industry. Okay? What this means is, this is one of the options when a buyer calls you and says, I'd like to see this house. Okay, well, I have 3 options for you. We have to get into some sort of contractual relationship for me to show you a home. I can exclusively represent you on this property. I can non-exclusively represent you, and I can also provide a facilitation opportunity for you. And we'll get to that in a minute because the facilitator agreement is super interesting too. But the non-exclusive means that they can work with any other agent. It just might stipulate that you're going to show this one house to them. And yes, this form right here does challenge procuring cause. It will. It does and it will, which is why we kind of stopped using it.
Say more about that. It challenges procuring cause.
It challenges procuring cause, meaning when you are not exclusively represented by an agent and a client has the opportunity to see a home with multiple agents, it will challenge who is the person that ultimately led the buyer to make the decision to purchase a home. And traditionally it has been the person that shows the home the first time will win procuring cause.
Kind of threshold rule.
It's a threshold rule.
Thank you.
This has the same language. This is a form that's always existed. The only change is this 48 and 49, just saying it cannot exceed anything stipulated in here. And the biggest change or the biggest difference between the two forms is, can the client work with anyone else or not? Simple as that.
One thing on this. We've got our broker admin commission on a separate document, but it's not on the buyer, it's not on here. Given that it can't be collected unless it's on that document, you're probably gonna need BAC on the contract.
On the buyer
And-
contract?
Yeah, right.
And this one.
Yeah, because if you're capped on that, I was just looking at the language, it says specifically on this contract, as opposed to this and other contracts that might be signed, it's on that contract. And I just put it in mine, it's always in there, whatever the broker.
You put your percentage plus.
I put the broker admin commission in there, so it's in there, it's signed off on, it's in the contract, but in the absence of that, and you collect the broker admin, I would suggest you're not gonna be in compliance.
So you just write it in under.
Just in other, something to the effect of buyer agrees to pay X dollar broker admin commission to Keller Williams Select upon successful close.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't have to be flowery or fancy, it's just having it out there.
Get it on there.
And lately, anything like that, I'm having people initial. Anything that's a 2.7 list.
This contract has to encompass all money coming to the broker.
It's overt.
Oh, okay, so that form that we have
So
now,
like in my example that I used where I charge 3%, but the cooperating compensation is 2.7, I'd be more than covered.
Yes, in that instance.
In that particular instance, I would be. However, I should be putting 3% plus.
yeah.
Yes, and you guys, just so you know, you can charge whatever you want over 450 and you collect the difference. There's someone out there that charges $1,000 for their broker admin. It's a lot of money.
Oh.
There's also someone out there that charges that.
There is also someone
Out there.
out there that charges, yeah. And actually, it's questionable. I don't have the paperwork to verify this, but I do know that there's just someone kind of crazy out there that is currently charging 2.7 plus whatever is being paid out.
Alexis, I think it's worth noting for everyone's talking about the change in the documents. There's very little change to your representation, as you can see in here. So when buyers are asking about the change that's happening for the NAR settlement in Minnesota, I've been letting them know that Minnesota has been doing this, like
The entire time,
and you can see that with the little changes. And so I think it's
Oh,
worth
exactly.
understanding and knowing that.
You've had the best forms in this country.
Absolutely.
We have had for over 20 years, this practice in place.
Yeah.
These practices in place. The change is gonna come from the consumer having a perspective or opinion that challenges how we do business.
Right.
And the reality is, again, going back to, if you're dealing with a for sale by owner, showing a buyer a for sale by owner, I mean, I have a separate conversation with a buyer, not necessarily to sit down at a coffee shop with like paperwork in front of us, but like a phone conversation or an in-person where I'm saying, this is a different experience that we're gonna have at this showing.
Thanks to the media.
What's that?
Thanks to the media.
Well, and honestly, the chit chat happening that's across consumers, right? It's the misinformation. All right, so this is cooperating broker compensation agreement. So definitions, this contract involves the property located at, there's the address, the seller is named, the seller broker is named, the buyer is named, the buyer broker is named. Seller's broker is real estate broker who's entered into a contract, a written agreement with the seller for market and or sale or lease of the property. So this covers sale or lease. Buyer broker is broker representing or assisting buyer who is contemplating making an offer, is entered into a contract to purchase or lease a property. Compensation, provided the transaction between the seller and buyer closes, seller's broker agrees to pay buyer's broker as buyer's broker compensation the following: percentage of sell price or flat dollar amount. Seller broker, buyer broker.
You scroll just to the, there you go. Thank you.
Does this take the place of?
Nothing.
No, okay.
This is no.
This is brand new. This doesn't replace anything. It's just this would be something that you show a home. And before showing a home, the listing agent tells you they're offering 2.2%. You write an offer and you submit this. This is where you would put a request for it being something different or exactly 2.2%.
You include this with the purchase agreement.
Mhm.
It's part of the purchase agreement.
And this is the place where you would request more. Yes.
Were you also suggesting last week that maybe you wait until you see if your buyer, you've showed the property and if your buyer has an interest before you make that phone call about the compensation? Because we're not driven by showing properties that, compensate better or whatever. So when would you make that phone call? After the buyer shows an interest in that property?
You get to decide how you're gonna run your business for yourself.
Okay.
For my business.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wanna know on every single home, because I need to counsel my client on what their financial obligation may be if they have interest. It is not about me being willing or unwilling to show homes. And if there's anything that I've learned about our industry, if there's gonna be enforcement, it's about consistency, not about adherence. And what I mean by that is, if I consistently, with every single client, inquire about commission, and I have record keeping that documents the conversations I'm having with my clients about their contractual obligation with me before they see any house, they're informed, and I'm putting the power in their hands to go ahead and make a decision what they want to do. The client gets to decide, and I'm going to have the client put in writing, I do not want to see this home, because they are not offering cooperating compensation. And if I do that consistently across all my clients, then I'm not steering.
I would think if you had that conversation in the beginning and then another conversation, if that was the home they wanted, remember you're gonna do it every.
I'm just telling you, I'm not gonna do it that way.
Okay.
You get to do it however you want.
You want to be consistent as a person who used to sit on the board. You want to be consistent because the number one thing that's going to come out of this, and it's common, is did you steer?
Yeah.
We're going to have steering complaints, steering hearings. So if you do Alexis's way before you show a house and you have some
Consistent.
type of documentation, then you can never be accused of steering because they are coming.
And I'm gonna have the clients indicate that they don't want to see a home based on the compensation, but the clients are gonna put it in writing. I'm not gonna have any sort of documentation that says they aren't offering any compensation. Are you sure you want to see it? I would never say something like that. I'm gonna say, here are the following homes, here's their compensation that they're offering. And we've had the conversation right out the gate as far as how all of this works. Please confirm you want to see all these properties. No steering or indication that I'm trying to push them in a certain direction. Their financial obligation to me changes depending on what the seller is willing to do. I'm also going to introduce to the buyer that they can potentially ask for a different cooperative compensation, but it doesn't mean that they're going to agree to it or offer. And if they want to do that, I will bring them. And I'm going to have record keeping that shows that I've shown homes that don't offer any cooperative compensation because the client wanted to see it. None of this has anything to do with me. It's about informing. And I would never, ever, ever show a home without knowing that information. And then they want to write an offer, and then I have to tell them there's no cooperative compensation. So you're gonna have to come up with $12,000 more at closing just to buy this house. I feel like it's my responsibility to educate them before the showing about that piece of information, just like I would the disclosure statement. Look at the disclosure statement. They had a wet basement that they fixed. Do you still want to see the home? It's in the same parallel lines.
Dawn
Robert.
asked online, or where you just say the buyer is responsible for your fee, and if there's any compensation offered, that would reduce their obligation. Going back to the language of the agreement.
Is there a question?
Yeah, but it's not.
Alexa,
It's just, that's the only. interpretation. The buyer's
This-
responsible fee, and if there's any compensation offered, that would reduce their obligation.
May reduce it
It's already in there.
in the buyer broker.
Yep.
So logistically, this is gonna be a night, we can barely hardly get our agents to reply to us when we send offers.
Yeah.
But, so we send out an email to, I got 5 showings I wanna do, I send out the listing agent to ask them if they're offering any cooperative broker. I send back the homes to my buyer, say this one, 2 of them haven't replied, let me know what houses you wanna see. They do it, one says nothing. Is it okay for me to give feedback to that agent saying my buyer does not want to see this house broken to the lack of cooperative broker? Or am I getting myself?
If your buyers look at that.
It's good feedback.
It's good feedback. And here's, the deal, you can't come to me.
Detail. No, I agree. Well, can I email it? I have an email from text from my buyer. See that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Give me a time.
Let me just give you guys an example, because this isn't, before I show any home, I send the disclosure statements.
Yeah.
We do too. Yeah.
And that's not like above standard. I was just simply I'm giving an example.
No, I agree.
So when I don't have disclosure statements, I do have buyers that don't want to see a home because there's not disclosure statements available. They know they want to vet the home via the disclosure statements first. This is not much different. Okay? And if you practice consistently and don't make special arrangements or agree to special circumstances, and you're always consistent with the way you're doing business, it'll never be a problem. As long as it's still following the rules.
On the larger brokerages, can we call the front desk and ask them what the cooperative broker compensation is?
I don't think Honey would be able to manage.
We talked about that. I would imagine we're gonna get.
Maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll get there. Maybe other brokerages will get there. I do know there's some apps coming and there's some discussion of.
Yeah, there's gotta be a central database where this stuff's gonna be available.
We would hope so.
Well, let's not go down that rabbit hole
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
Here's a rabbit.
Brad,
Specific to this form, and I don't want to contradict, maybe I
Go ahead.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
This is not an addendum to the purchase agreement. It is not anything to do with the purchase agreement. This.
the actual clients are not even a party to this agreement.
Correct. So caution you, if you're sending in something trying to secure buyer broker compensation and you're writing the offer and you're using this as a tool to secure that, they could cast that aside and sign your contract as it is with no compensation noted. This precedes your actions. This is doing it on Monday to get documentation that a payout of X is going to be provided to show on Tuesday. So when you write the offer on Tuesday, you've got guaranteed confirmation of payout, and it doesn't have to be in the purchase agreement. Absent this, which you'll get to, is the purchase agreement language. You don't need this. You don't need this. This is just another means of which.
Supplemental.
It's another mean, but don't write that offer or presumption of payout because you heard it and they're gonna sign it because you can't buy, this
It's
is
no
binding a
different
different
than-
party.
It's no different than a inspection amendment.
I'd like to piggyback on what he said. Darren said, if I'm showing 6 houses on a particular day, I need to get the broker signatures on 6
No.
different forms.
No. No, this would be before writing an offer on a home that they have interest in, singularly.
And you can do it without this. There is another means which you'll
Yeah,
get
there is
to.
another
There is
I'm
another.
just reading it.
Where
No,
it's-
you're doing great.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it'll
you.
become
Appreciate
clearer.
Or can we reference this in the purchase agreement? Like on the.
So
other-
this is a cooperating broker compensation agreement. This is between broker and broker. I did read and specifically written from EXP that they will never use this form. They plan to never offer compensation from their brokerage to any other brokerage. They will allow the sellers to offer cooperative compensation directly to the buyer broker through title, not through broker to broker relationship. So if you have a transaction with EXP, they will not use this form. I mean, doesn't mean you can't try. I'm just saying, don't hold your breath. Yes.
Going back to the steering question,
Yes.
could you add in an addendum to your buyer contract, just stating buyer and agent agree, buyer does not want to see any homes offering no compensation to buyer broker?
If your client wants to sign that, yeah, you can write anything that you want to ahead of time that says, my responsibility as a buyer agent representing you, and I will share with you cooperative compensation offerings on all the properties, and I will allow you, the buyer, to make the decision as to whether or not you'd want to see the property.
I would use, as a person on the board, I would use that verbiage versus that verbiage. That verbiage is gonna get you in trouble. Because
Is it
then they can
looking
come
like
back
you
and say,
created
"Did you
it?"
Counsel your buyer, did you tell
Right.
them this?
Yeah.
Did, now you're directly steering basically by using that language. If you
Because
use-
they're not writing the contract,
Right.
you are.
Correct.
So it's the whole idea of everything we need to be doing is putting the opportunity and onus into the client's hands
Yeah.
to make the decision.
Alexis, are we able to add that into like the clauses in transaction desk?
We can eventually get there, yeah. Absolutely. No, great suggestion. Appreciate that. Yep. We should probably revisit that. That'd be a good productivity committee. Opportunity to review and what's missing. And then with Michelle, even you guys come up with an idea of what you want that to look like. And then Michelle get it approved. Yeah,
And there's probably other clauses that need to be added to
Removed.
that or added to the.
maybe.
Hmm.
We have quite a few in there. Disclosure statements, disclosure alternatives. The only thing that changed on here is the Cemetery Act. I'm not gonna get into it, just know that it's there and, because the client needs to be reading these, okay? And filling these out. What's that, Trent?
Is there an option for not yet?
I only saw yes or no, so maybe add a box
It's just-
and have them initial.
Yeah, exactly. Seller property disclosure statement. Notices and special assessments, this did change. So it's expanded is how I would most generically explain this. The following questions to be answered by the best of the seller's knowledge. The seller has or has not received a notice regarding any proposed ongoing or completed improvement project from any assessing authority, the cost of which may be assessed or is currently assessed against the property. If has, please attach and or explain.
The way that's worded, you would have to disclose a completed assessment. What's the look back period on that?
I would probably partner with title on something like that.
There you go.
So they're saying I have no idea. Other defects, material facts, and additional comments. Are there any other material facts that could adversely and significantly affect an ordinary buyer's use or enjoyment of the property or any intended use of the property? If yes or no, then explain. This language right here, you guys, I'm extremely passionate about, okay? If any of you ever call me and say, does this need to be disclosed? The answer is automatically yes. Literally, like if you start dialing my phone number or looking at my contact before hitting send, the answer is yes, okay? It just is. There's never gonna be any harm in disclosing a material fact because the idea that it could adversely and significantly affect an ordinary buyer's use, enjoyment, or intended use of the property. That is so broad. So broad. Just encourage disclosure. Okay, we're gonna skip vacant land. Facilitator service agreement for the buyer. It can be exclusive or non-exclusive. Broker shall, unless prohibited by governing authority, check all that apply. These are all the things you're gonna do or not do, depending on what's checked. It gives you the opportunity to be very specific, okay? So that's helpful. And then it says the buyer's obligation. And then line 68 and 69 say they may not receive compensation that exceeds what's written in this agreement. And then signed, just a buyer facilitation agreement. We do have a seller facilitator agreement. So that is a change. Okay, it's essentially the same thing. It says when it starts, when it ends, exclusive or non-exclusive. The option exists. What you offer as an agent is up to you. Okay? And it does indicate the things you're gonna do. Are you gonna put them in the MLS? Are you gonna put a lockbox on the property? Are you going to provide the seller with information about other service providers related to the real estate transaction, meaning like a closer, title company? And then it says any additional services, okay? If you decide that you want to, if you want to use a facilitator agreement for things like a quick showing, this would be where you would say line 34, you could check and say see attached, which could be like your one single showing agreement, if you will. You can make that up yourself. Here's the deal. You still need this form. This form is the cover ourselves. Your additional one to stipulate or explain what you will or won't do. It does have all the same things in here. Talks about total broker compensation. It has retainer fee as an option, percentage of compensation, or flat fee. If seller agrees to pay buyer broker compensation directly to the buyer broker, then seller's obligation to pay broker's compensation as specified in line 133 and 134 shall be reduced by the amount paid up to flat fee or percentage of the selling price or other. Cooperating broker compensation gives you the option to indicate how much you will would share in a cooperative scenario. Representing or assisting. Assisting refers to facilitation. And otherwise it looks just like a listing agreement. We're gonna skip the tenant representation agreement, but there is one in case you needed to know that. We're gonna skip the leasing agreement. But we do have standard forms related to leasing. Listing contract exclusive right to sell. So this is the standard listing agreement that we're used to using. Everything is basically the same, except when we get into total broker compensation. Same language I just went over, as well as line 129 and 130, which is cooperating broker compensation. So this is where you have it indicated and you would amend or, I can't think of an example right now where you would add, but you could amend if need to be at a later time, Brooke.
So this does not have the box to check where it authorizes us to share or not share that they are offering the compensation just on the amendment. But, okay.
Yes, good. Mhm. This is very clearly disclosing it and offering.
If they don't, I mean, if it's on an amendment, whether that's, we need the seller to clearly indicate whether they want us to disclose it. Why would it not be on the original? Right.
I'm so glad that's a rhetorical question.
Back to my okay answer. Moving on.
New construction purchase agreement. I don't know why it's there in the first place. Did they give any insight?
You can scroll back down a little bit.
That, it kind of got glossed over, I think.
I'm not going over
in
this one.
practical
Okay.
sense. Because the surprising thing to me when I said, and by the way, the only reason I know any of this is I went to the training by Minnesota Association. That was a couple of weeks ago. And as we're getting into it, the listing contract doesn't change a ton.
Nope.
It's still your overall compensation, your overall commission, and listing broker to provide compensation to buyer broker, which is like it is today. There is a clause in there that when we get there, we'll probably have to unpack it a little bit. You kind of touched on it, but blew past it, but it's not the right time to hit it anyway, so.
Did they talk at all about why they would have the
concessions?
no, why disclose or not disclose on the amendment?
That was barely touched on,
Yeah.
and I don't know why that is, but I struggled to figure out the application for it, but for what you were saying, like, we see people put out their carpet allowance, but there's probably nothing, first off, we can debate.
I just don't know why anyone would say, I'm gonna offer this, but don't tell anyone.
And I also don't know why somebody would offer concessions, but not offer buyer broker.
I have clients who would see all of this and say, listen, if I have to offer it, I'll offer it, but don't offer it, make them ask for it. Don't tell them we're doing it. We might be able to get away without paying them out. And if we can, then we want to see a variable rate commission. If we can't, then.
Well, then that form is no work perfect for you. Yes, thank you.
Right, it's those.
Yeah, no,
it's
totally.
it's your.
All right, we're on purchase agreement. This is an important one. Nothing changes from where we were, except, okay, we are under financing. Mortgage financing contingency, so line 70 can be checked, or line 77, just clarifying, it's one or the other, it's never both. Line 93. It starts with, upon delivery of the written statement, if this purchase agreement does not close on the stated closing date for any reason related to financing, included but not limited to interest rate discount points, if any, then seller may, at seller option, declare this purchase agreement canceled. In which case this purchase agreement is canceled. If seller declares this purchase agreement canceled, buyer and seller shall immediately sign a cancellation of said cancellation and direct all earnest money paid here to forfeited to the seller as liquidated damages. So a commitment date letter is submitted to a seller and is compliant. If it doesn't close, the seller can cancel and will keep the earnest money.
And I'm no attorney, none of us are, I don't think, but when you specify it as liquidated damages, it can't be contested.
Nope.
I think the only changes on that is they capitalized it. That's the only change.
And it's for this language, when it was originally changed, has been what?
Does the cancellation still override this? Is that what you're
You
gonna
still
ask?
gotta have them sign a cancellation, and that's not always, that then becomes the big negotiable.
Okay, you guys,
So again, earnest money is nothing.
the only way earnest money is non-refundable is if the seller has it in their account and won't give it back. Literally, that's it. Because the truth of the matter is, regardless of what this says, all parties still have to sign a cancellation. If all parties don't agree to the terms of what's in the cancellation and they won't sign it, it's not canceled. They're supposed to. What this language does right here is gives a seller a huge supporting document to take to court.
Statutory.
In a statutory cancellation, it would not be contested and the seller would keep the earnest money. Okay, but here's the deal, guys. We are not attorneys. We are not judges. We do not enforce anything. It's still up to the clients to sign that final cancellation of purchase agreement. Yes.
Still a game of chicken unless you statutory cancellation.
Yeah, through the courts, which has nothing to do with us.
You can't list.
30 days,
Oh, it's 30.
30 days from post. And it costs money. It's not conciliation court.
But this is after the written statement.
Has been submitted and complies. I mean, you can talk to your clients however you decide is appropriate for your business. But at the end of the day, if your client doesn't listen to you and doesn't agree with this and they submitted their compliance or their letter, and then they lost their jobs, and they're like, I'm not letting them keep the money. I am not gonna be the agent that's talking to those people in a manner that they have to do anything.
Right.
It comes down to the final cancellation of purchase agreement that indicates where the money goes.
Right.
And technically speaking, it's all up for negotiation. If we're a party to the conversation, if they're gonna contest it through statutory cancellation, that's in the courts and we have nothing to do with that.
But you also can't list the property.
Right.
Correct.
But
You
if
had,
they-
yeah, we'll save that.
I mean, you could do it with the contingency.
Call me if you have questions. DVA funding fee, funding fee based on loan amount not otherwise waived, that was added.
Wait, can you go back to that? Just really quick, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
If it is waived, you just leave that blank.
Line 233 under assessments, added notwithstanding the foregoing, buyer shall assume any levied assessments that cannot be paid in the year of closing. Just clarification language on assessments. Okay, seller's contribution to buyer broker compensation. Seller agrees to pay seller agrees. This is an important clarification. It's on the purchase agreement, so it does have to indicate that the seller is doing it. Does that make sense? Seller agrees to pay buyers, brokers compensation at closing, X% of the selling price or a flat dollar amount, which is in addition to any seller's contribution to buyer closing costs paid at closing. This amount is in addition to the listing broker's offer of cooperating compensation, if any.
So that amount will not apply towards the cap of closing costs that a buyer can get
Correct.
on a loan.
It's in addition, has nothing to do.
The lender's not gonna cap them and say, well, you have this much.
According to the communications, the lenders are not concession, a seller concession. Lender specific seller concession. Does that make
And
sense?
so if this is checked here that the seller is paying, then we don't use the co-broker compensation form. Is that correct? Or to say it a different way, if the compensation form is used, which specifically refers to the listing broker compensating the buyer's broker, then the amount here from the seller would actually be 0.
So it goes like this. Alexis, your listing broker. Hi, Alexis. Is your seller offering any concessions on this? What percent or is there any buyer compensation being offered here? How much?
So,
And
okay,
then, but hold on, just.
yes, they are,
How much?
2.7.
Is that coming from the seller directly or from your brokerage?
It's coming from our brokerage.
So then you fill out the buyer broker addendum. If it's coming from the seller, it goes on here.
This is, look at this amount is in addition to the listing broker's offer of cooperating compensation, if any.
So it could be both.
It could be both.
Where it becomes both
This is where
is
you
if,
make up the-
where it becomes both is if somebody's offering 2%.
Yeah, and you're asking for more.
And you have
Yeah.
a 2% buyer, a cooperating broker agreement that says 2%, that's struck first. It's not an offering until it's not contractual. Because MLS isn't there to bind anybody to anything. So now you're at 2%, but you're sitting on a buyer broker agreement that's 2.7. The
The
0.7,
0.7 would go in here.
absent the cooperating broker agreement of any kind,
The cooperating broker agreement comes first.
if it comes first.
If it
But-
comes
but
first.
yes, But yes, it has to come.
It has to come first if it exists. If it exists, this would be in addition to this existing first. If it doesn't exist, this is the only place it's indicated. Because
And
it's coming from the seller.
This can potentially be pretty quick sales, but buyers at a pretty big disadvantage.
In an multiple offer situation.
Correct. I mean, you have to get that signed before you turn this in, but then agent B is not getting that signed before they turn it in. Their buyer wins, your buyer loses because you don't even get your purchase agreement turned in.
Hold on, say that again.
Sorry.
He's talking about multiple offer
There's
situations.
multiple offers,
Yeah.
right? And you're doing your job of getting that signed prior to sending in your
That
purchase
being
agreement.
the co-broker.
Or
Okay.
co-broker agreement.
Okay.
Agent B says, I'll figure it out on the backside. I'm willing to trust it and figure it out. Just turns in the purchase agreement. You're almost putting potentially your buyer in danger of not getting a house because the other agent beats you with the purchase agreement. And if they sign it first,
But that's not really any different than right now, I would argue, because if you're in a multiple offer situation, the seller accepts the purchase agreement before you can get your purchase agreement and they're gonna take it.
the difference is we're counting on a listing agent to be responsive and a seller to sign something timely before we.
But
can-
the other agent's putting their buyer at risk. What if they're not giving any cooperative
Well,
compensation?
the
They're
agent's
putting
putting themselves
themselves
at
at
risk. And some
You should
agents
just
are
put the
using-
2.7 on that.
Here's.
This is above and beyond.
This is the practical stuff we should be talking about and need to be talking about.
We're going to be talking about. Today is a class that's just about what's changed on the forms.
Yeah.
And to make sure that we're all aware of the changes. We're gonna be doing another one next week, a week from today, which everything will be in practice already. And then we're gonna continue following up, having practical application conversations about how we use this in real life. Right now, we're just talking theory, okay? We're just talking the literal practice of what's happening in the forms and let's assume all things are easy. They're not going to be always easy. They never have been, it's gonna continue in that manner.
Let-
So, yeah.
Go, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Got it.
So right now, this is, in absence of cooperative compensation, this would be used. If cooperating compensation is already addressed, we'd use that previous form that indicates listing broker, paying by buyer broker and what that looks like. If it is insufficient and it exists, you add it right here. Okay? Yes.
I'm just thinking about the current buyers that we're helping and in process with. Interested homes out there that have it listed on the MLS currently. Would it be a good idea to then just like save that PDF of that MLS showing the payout right now, or it doesn't matter because that's all.
After the 17th, it won't matter.
It doesn't matter.
But what I would say is, for your records, download, do whatever you need to do to get extract the information from the MLS. And then as of the 17th, document it on that form
Got it.
if your buyer's interested in,
Because it's probably in their listing agreement already.
well, it is.
So-
It is actually, otherwise it
So then
can't be on
It
there.
can't be on the MLS, so it would, they're
Yep.
offering.
We're gonna go through a transition period with all this.
Yeah.
We all are, everyone is. What that looks like specifically, we don't know. This is definitely not gonna cover what that looks like. We'll get there though.
I'm gonna offer one thing because the first will get here before. And these forms become mandatory on August 1st.
Yeah.
But the rule changes are not in place. Where people are going to get tripped up is I think people are going to fill this out and put buyer broker comp in here when it's already and still secured by MLS. So be wary.
Do we leave that blank or?
That's only going to be playing a role if it's an added.
Okay, you guys, these go into effect in 2 days.
Yes.
Closings are not gonna happen that go under contract in 2 days before the 17th. All of these need to be used with the idea that it's already in place. That 2-week window or 17-day window from day one, that the closing's happening after that. These have to be documented because it's not just the establishment of new contracts on the 17th, it's the closing of the contracts. Does that make sense?
We already have a schedule to close on the 25th.
I don't know.
I wondered about that.
It's closing after. I'm assuming it's already grandfathered. Yeah.
It's all time stamped at
So
MLS.
anything new that goes in, anything new that gets,
As long as it's published, guys, it's a contractual arrangement. Up until the point it ceases to be published.
did everyone hear that? If you have something pending to close after August 17th, you're fine. It's already pended.
It's published, it's still in MLS. The confusing part of this is gonna be new forms August 1. Then you got August 15th and 17th, which are 2 different days. The settlement's the 17th. The 15th is when.
MLS is gonna stop showing cooperative
Right,
compensation.
strip it, yeah.
So here's the deal. These forms need to be used as of August 1st. So you have a new buyer relationship, a new seller relationship, or a new purchase agreement contract. As of August 1st, you need to use these forms. Anything else that is not under purchase agreement, but you have a representation agreement and they go under purchase agreement post August 1st, you have to use these forms. Okay? That's the purchase agreement. I'm not gonna go over the lease agreement. We are over time, and I just want you guys to know that, I knew that they were going to organically, we were going to organically create topics of conversation that we're gonna have to come back to. Right? And this purchase agreement conversation, all the compensation, all of this needs to be further discussed. For anyone that didn't make it today, a week from now is when I'm gonna do this all over again. You're welcome to come for the practice. But after that, we're gonna post additional opportunities for you to participate, practical application of these and discuss best practices. As always, there is no standardization. We do have best practices though, okay? And we'll be talking about them. We'll be talking about scripts and role play with sellers, scripts and role play with buyers, and then probably scripts and role play with other agents.
That's a good one, yeah.
And you guys, if we want to lead the industry, let's raise the bar of our level of communication and our forward thinking. And it's all about mindset, right? It's all about mindset. If you act like this is going to be a lot more work, it's going to feel like a lot more work. If you understand and embrace the fact that this is happening and it's a necessary change for our industry, regardless of the reasons why, and even if you don't agree with it, but you take it on with a positive attitude and positive energy, it'll be a better experience. It's just the truth. I'm not even trying to blow smoke. It's literally the truth. Because if you're going to be annoyed about it and you talk to another agent and you have an annoyance on your voice, it's not going to go as well as it could. If you call someone and be like, hey, I understand how challenging this must be. You're getting 45 showings, you're getting 3 showings, or whatever. Can you just let me know if you're offering cooperating compensation? We all have to band together to make this work successfully for our industry. There is no one that we can identify as the enemy. There is no enemy in this situation. As a matter of fact, you'll be your own worst enemy if you don't approach us with the necessary positivity and open-mindedness. Yes, sir.
You want to sell your listings, communicate with the other buyers, 'cause I guarantee you the other agents aren't going to be communicating with us.
100%.
If you can get cooperative compensation out there right away, they'll probably show your homes and won't show that. Well, the buyers could choose not to show out their homes.
Just send it their way.
So there is some conversation about a database, technology database that has been created and developed over the last couple months and launched, and that hovers over website advertisements of homes that shows the cooperating compensation. And I think it's going to be a race to, this is opinion, class is over and I'm just telling you my opinion right now, where there is going to be a race to how are we displaying cooperative compensation?
Yeah.
And there's going to be some apps and some supportive technology tools that we can participate in or not. But the bottom line is things are changing and we're going to see a lot of stuff. And all of us on the leadership team are going to do everything we can to be informative and proactive in supporting you and your business needs.
I think the common theme that came up was, what if that agent doesn't call me back? So my biggest thing to everyone here is call the other agents back. Like, be the people who are calling them back.
Communicate.
Yeah, be that person.
You guys, there are tools I'm thinking of, like if I have a listing and I'm paying 2.5, like I can actually have in my clipboard, like we are operating cooperating compensation of 2.5% on this listing at 123 Main Street. And I can send that to anyone who's going to be a showing agent. Yes, it takes more work, but there are tips and tricks along the way that we can come up with that doesn't always need a phone conversation. You can text as well or email. Yes, Ben.
Could you literally put an A-frame that says offering higher compensation of X amount in the house?
Yeah, some agents won't
You can
show
do
it
it
if they
on
don't know.
Can you do a
So
rider,
they would
sign
have the
rider, yeah.
opportunity-
Can you do
Yeah.
a rider?
But they would have
Is that legal?
the opportunity of seeing that if they are willing to show it.
If it's on the MLS, connected to the MLS, affiliated with the MLS, or even lightly connected or construed to be in relationship with the MLS, the answer is no cooperative compensation. No funny business, no trick words, no.
Can't say buyer agent friendly on the agent remarks.
Not unless you want to find.
Oh, wow.
Be important.
Would
So-
you be able to have a link in the notes and showing time that goes to your?
Nope.
Nope.
I'm doing,
Maybe, I'm trying to find a way around it.
duly licensed in Florida and Minnesota, so just do not said that they were gonna put buyer broker compensation in the financial remarks because they're not open to the public. And they literally put it out and NAR came after them like a piranha and said, nope, you
won't
can't do
happen.
it. And they sent it all out and said, you can put it in the financial remarks because it's not seen by the public. And then they had to come back out and said, no.
But it's a part of MLS.
What about a supplement? Why not a supplement?
It cannot be affiliated with the MLS.
This is so stupid.
So here's the deal, you guys. You can go put a sign in the yard and not have your property on the MLS, right? You can, physically, literally can. Doesn't mean you won't get a fine.
Agent comments, text me at this number for,
Any information,
so you, nothing.
nothing. You guys, nothing.
Agents already put that, contact me at XYZ with any questions.
Great, so keep doing it. Don't say anything about that you're friendly, or that you are cooperative, or that you are willing to compromise. Just don't do anything that, like, if you have, you guys, if you have to call me and ask, could this work? The answer is no. What?
Right.
No, I'm serious.
I call you.
Well, I'm sad about it, but the answer is, I mean it on the MLS. If it ends with on the MLS or in agent remarks or in supplements or on showing time, the answer is no.
Friendly conversation. Here's my number.
Happy to be friendly if you text me.
Friendly conversations, man.
Friendly conversations, welcome. You guys, we're all in this together, right? And we're gonna be sharing our best practices, what's working, right? 'Cause that's what we do, right?
Right.
So I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much for your attention and focus. Yes,
Can these forms be sent to us as well? The
Yeah.
highlights?
yeah, I can send them out. Yeah, I'll just post them on the Facebook group.
I was gonna let this go, but it might not make sense,
Go
because
ahead.
somebody's gonna sign a listing contract after August 1 and before the class. Go to the listing contract on lines 122 through 125. Because this is one of the more confusing pieces. That's a lease. And this does get into application, but I also think it's important to understand the language, and it is confusing. It's one that kind of spun everybody in circles for a bit. Is it in there? Is it in there? Did we cover
Listing
it?
contract. The right after facility services. You control F it.
Yeah.
Or do you need it back for that?
Now's not the time.
I needed one too.
You'll be 3 forms down from this one.
It is?
Should be, I think. Maybe I might have skipped a few. Right after listing or facilitator services. Right up there, isn't it?
These are all facilitator.
Facilitator.
Oh, after this one. There.
That's
All right.
lease. That's lease.
Should be the next one. huh?
While we're scrolling, one of the things is the.
Here it is.
Here it is.
Okay. This is, so.
122 to 125.
You know, at 115 to 118 or 120,
Yep,
that's pretty much what we've already got. It might be slightly changed, but it's in principle the same thing. And at 129 on down, surprisingly, it's virtually the same thing. It's the stuff wedged in the middle. It says if seller agrees to pay buyer broker's compensation,
directly to the buyer broker.
right, then seller's obligation to pay broker's compensation.
Shall be
Yes.
reduced by the amount of,
And this is where you got an open-ended field.
so it could match and it could not.
It can be whatever you agree to. But what you're going, let's just say you have a 6% listing and a 2.7 payout, and you get an offer that is a 2.0. What happens to the 0.7? Literally, until you have a contract that tells you, you can't have everybody chasing the same dollars. but in theory, it could go to the listing broker.
So
In
in
theory, it could go to the buyer in some other.
In this
form.
example, we already use this in our practice. We have a listing, it's a 6% listing. We're paying out in the MLS 2.7. Buyer comes directly to us. We decide to either represent them or regard them as a customer. It is still up to us to determine what we do with that, the 2.7 that we were originally going to pay out in the MLS. Do we reduce our commission overall to 4%? Do we take all 6% to ourselves? So this is a scenario that says, if the seller is paying the buyer's broker, how much is the overall compensation being reduced? So you as an agent get to determine if that matches what you're paying out, what the seller's paying the buyer's broker or not.
Up to a cap. Up to a cap. But even if you put in there that you'll reduce it, let's just say in theory, you say, okay, somebody's going to offer less. It's so hard to unpack. Once
They're
you-
gonna ask for less.
Ask for
The
less.
buyer
They're asking
agent,
for
the
less.
buyer agent only has 2% secured and they
You're-
come in and say, I'm getting 2%.
If you're trying to protect your listing broker portion of what is not being paid out to a buyer broker, then you're probably going to want to have the line on 123 match your buyer broker compensation. Meaning somebody writes you an offer and they're asking for 2.7 from the seller.
Mhm.
And your contract says you're offering a cooperating broker of 2.7. In theory, those are canceling each other out, but they don't until it's in this contract. So what?
So here's the other thing that is this particular area is if seller agrees to pay buyer broker compensation directly to the buyer broker, there's no form that shows that. There's no publication that shows that. There's no form that shows that. So this is where it's documented on the listing side to show the seller's paying the cooperative compensation directly to the buyer's broker. Because it's not indicated that the listing broker, there's nowhere else that it's showing it.
Nowhere else where? You mean in the purchase agreement?
No. Saying this is where you indicate, this is the listing agreement.
Well, you've got your cooperating broker information right there. This is that's the same as what we've got presently.
Right. But
You-
this is the broker shall offer compensation to cooperating brokers. I'm talking about, this is if the seller
Correct.
is directly paying the broker's compensation directly to the buyer's broker. We don't have that anywhere.
Correct,
This
in
is
our
the-
current forms,
In
yes.
any of our
Yes,
forms. This is the
yes.
only place that we're showing we're taking a 6% listing. And then we say, we're gonna offer this is the part where you guys, this is all new to all of us. So we're gonna have to work through this. But why would I take a 6% listing if the buyer and reduce it in the contract? Does that make sense? I would cross these lines out and I would just say, my compensation is 3.5%. And the seller is gonna pay the buyer broker directly. And because why would I take a 6% listing to then be reduced by this line right here? And then where else am I gonna say that the seller is gonna pay the buyer broker X amount?
We probably need to talk about this.
Yeah, we can.
Because you got me spinning in circles now.
So can I ask a question on, say, 6% and the seller side is 3.3, the buyer side is 2.7. So in something like this on line 119, we would still put the 6 there.
Yep.
And then on line 24, we could put 2.7 there.
Line 22 to 25 is specifically saying it's taking the listing broker's responsibility to pay anything to anyone out of this conversation. The line 122 to 125 is reducing the amount earned from the seller and saying the seller is going to actually pay whatever they want to the buyer broker. So lines 115 to 121 is where this is your overall listing commission. Lines 129 to 134 is what you're gonna pay out cooperating, and line 122 to 125 is just funny language right now that we're gonna figure out later.
So we would just leave
It's about-
22 to 325, which probably should leave blank then.
If you leave.
When you are listing a home and you're gonna go do it, let's talk about it individually until I can actually have a class where we're gonna vet this out more. Because my honest opinion is, I wouldn't use line 122 to 125 as a listing agent. I would only put line 115 to 121, what am I gonna earn? Making it up 3.5%. And then 129 to 135 would be 0. And I would just not use line 122 to 125. Because it doesn't make any sense to. And I'm not gonna we're already 25 minutes over. When you have a listing agreement that you're gonna go under and you're gonna use it, if they don't want to have our brokerage pay a buyer brokerage, then just have line 115 to 121 be what are you gonna earn? What is our brokerage gonna earn for listing the home?
So in this situation, when you mentioned EXP is not gonna do broker to broker.
Yep,
This would be where you're dealing with that EXP situation because.
where EXP is dealing with their own situation.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
So this is that situation right there, reading the language.
Yeah, where the seller is gonna pay directly, which essentially our buyers don't care where the money is coming from.
Yeah.
Is the seller paying it or is the listing broker paying it, right? If it's cooperating compensation, it's cooperating compensation. Buyer isn't gonna, it's not gonna matter to the buyer.
Yep.
Ultimately, it's where is it coming from? This is giving you the option of saying, what's the overall compensation? Is it gonna be reduced? And are you gonna pay anything out? Because if you're reducing it, you don't use line 129 to 135. I don't know. I might have to.
That's
research.
about that's about antitrust laws, because if brokers are cooperating because they get paid, that's just saying the seller's gonna pay it directly to the buyer. It's all about antitrust laws, and it wouldn't surprise me to see us go to 122 to 125 before long.
Just going that.
I understand this is muddy. It was muddy even for the 300 people,
Yep.
but we got to the end of it because we kept digging through it. And this was a class led by 2 attorneys, you know, for the Minnesota Association, the 2 guys. So it's muddy, but the thing to understand on this is if you put 0 in 122 to 125, and you've got a 6% listing, and now you get an offer from that was written as if seller to pay 2.7. They're contractually on the hook for 8.7. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because you're not reducing what you were going to pay out. It's being retained. So it's additive. So the concept here is if you have a 6% and you have a 2% buyer broker and you want to retain the 3.3 and just fix that. Then the way to do that is to put 2.7 in there. In the
124?
In the 124, because then if you get that offer that you don't pick up the phone, you don't get a contract struck, a co-broker, which by the way, I think is going to rarely happen. I don't think your co-broker agreement is going to happen for you. I think it's going to be written into the contract. And when it's written, it comes in at 2.7. This says, okay, we will reduce our commission by that amount up to a cap of 2.7. The reason you're capping it is if you put 3.5, well, or they write a one that asks for 3.5. Where's it coming from? Now it's coming from, now there's no reduction. You have to declare a reduction in this. This is honestly probably the most confusing language in all of the changes.
So what I see overall is we have business as usual that stops tomorrow. And we have new business as usual that starts the next day, okay? We're in a transition period. We've got some new antitrust language that's likely being added into our contracts. And this won't stay this way forever. There'll be new changes a year from now. And right now, we've got some, what I would call double shovel. Okay, you're trying to move dirt from one place to another, and you're doubling your effort in the movement. And we're gonna be doubling up on some language. We're gonna be doubling up on some clarity. And we're gonna need some opportunities to clarify what's actually happening. Okay, we're gonna work through it. It's not clear, it's not concise, and we haven't even started yet. And it's okay that it's not clear and concise, because it is a change. And we're gonna work through it. But, because what I'm seeing is a lot of double documentation. And best practice, these are great things to be brought up to discuss and vet out further to figure out what our best practices are and what it means and how it affects our business. And that our contracts actually match what our clients want. Right? Our contracts should match what our clients want.
I don't envy your, where you're next month.
It's just like you said, business as usual, and if there's anything that comes up from this, it's, you just gotta work through it. Most clients that I've been working with are talking about this, they're like, oh, we had no idea. Some actually do, then they're like, so what's gonna happen? I don't have to pay a buyer's agent or whatever. Like, well, yes and no. You wanna sell your house?
This clause in particular would be one that I think we would dive into, especially it being, this is a listing contract. And the purchase agreement is gonna be the most important document for us to review as quickly as possible. And then we're gonna get to the listing contract. I have some opinions on this that I need to confer with some other people to make sure that it can be done this way. So we'll get there, we'll talk about it. And you guys re-record everything. So by all means, if you can't make it to an upcoming class, but this is, you guys can all feel how important this is, that we know how to do. We know how to interact with all these forms appropriately. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So.